computer. Great. Just
Bill.
again, so everybody knows, we're going to be recording it. If you don't want to be seen, just blank your video. Just wondering, by a show of hands, how many folks is this a new to the Saturday Zoom sessions?
Bill?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The mouse seeds are trying to get in, but they say that the password's incorrect.
Worked for everybody else. So
Yeah.
tell them to go to Zoom, worldsfairphotos.com. Okay. Again, anybody new or? Oh, okay, great. Glad to have some new faces. Been doing this the last couple Saturdays, or actually the last couple months of Saturdays, as a way to try to get our minds off the pandemic and that. And this week it just happened to tie into Disneyland having its 65th birthday yesterday. So we'd like to have been there in person. Actually, there's no way in hell I would have gone yesterday, because the crowds, if there was no virus, were going to be insane. So we were there for the 25th, the 30th, the 40th. Every year it got progressively worse. And I said, no way would I be there yesterday. So we can do this virtually. So what I did was, when everybody starts, they start as muted. If there's something urgent that you need to say, and God forbid I'm making some terrible mistake, hit your space bar and we'll unmute. At the end of the slides, we'll do a Q&A, open discussion sort of thing. If you're using the chat feature, I won't be able to see it, but if there's something urgent, hopefully Carol will see it and come in from auxiliary control and let me know what's going on. So let me just start here, sharing the screen. And this was originally going to be Disneyland the first 25 years. And then I started looking at my pictures and said, whoa, I thought I had a few hundred pictures I could draw from, and it's actually a few thousand pictures. So I started concentrating on the first 5 years. And what I'll be doing is taking a look at photos that were taken during those first 5 years. So there may be some attraction that was there during those years that I don't have a 1957 photo. I might have a 1961 or 62 photo. We'll get to that maybe in a future one for the second 5 years or so. For the most part, what I did was I went with amateur shots. I did not try to go back to the ones that people have seen over and over of the same picture of the long line outside the gate on opening day, or Walt with the microphone giving the talk. So these are basically pictures that the average visitor took on their time going to the fair. And one of the things I wanted to start with was an example of what it takes to make some of these old pictures look suitable for today. So a lot of the old pictures from the 50s, 60s, that sort of thing, have turned very badly in color. So you'll get a slide like this. It's a nice view of the rock out at Tom Sawyer Island, but obviously the colors have all gone and shot. They've rotted away. Luckily, with the computer, you can go and start bringing these things back from the dead. And I have a page on my website which has suggestions, excuse me, on how to do that. So color is an issue. Again, another one that's red, great shot, and you're able to go and bring some life back into it. Sometimes you get pictures that are just really, really not properly exposed. So this shot, Mickey and somebody's doing something. Well, when you bring it back to life, it was when the Mickey Mouse Club was syndicated. You could come into Disneyland to go to the Mickey Mouse headquarters and potentially get your picture on the syndicated version of the Mickey Mouse Club show. Sometimes you have photos that are damaged. This one had a light leak. The colors are off. You can bring some of that back. In some cases, you have a really nice shot that looks great, except somebody photobombs it, like the giant forehead here. You can make people go away. And then if you get a really extreme one, somebody's mentioned earlier about mold or scratches or whatever. This one's kind of way off exposure-wise, got dirt, scratches, all sorts of a mess. But between, you can scan it, and then you have to take out most of the scratches of this nature by hand. You end up with something that's pretty recognizable. So we're going to jump back to 1955, first year of the park. And this is the entrance that you'd see when you were coming to it at that point in time. Very different than what we get today with the fortress sort of environment with security checks and package reviews and all the rest of it. but a different sort of thing. Hang on, there's somebody's just got some background noise here real quick, and I'm just going to see about muting everybody. So again, if you need to come up and say something, you can hit the space bar. Other than that, we'll, let's see, let me get rid of this here. We'll continue. So things were very primitive back in 55. Lots of dirt and lots of small trees. And again, the area has changed so much with 65 years of growth. Things have really grown in, and you end up with some very nice forested areas. But back then, it was a very barren look for certain parts of the park. You had some things that are there then that unfortunately are not there today. Captain Hook's pirate ship, for those of us that love tuna fish sandwiches, this was a great spot to go and sit out in the patio area behind it, enjoying a little time at the park. Again, the picture here shows how barren the road is, or the berm is rather, going around the railroad. You also have the baggage car. So some of the things like the trains have changed. They realize that putting people in some of the cars without any air, they got very hot, also blocked views, that sort of thing. So some of the trains and things that were there in 55 are no longer with us today. This is one of my favorite pictures of Disneyland, and it's the background I used when I joined in. Gazebo and a crowd listening to the band playing there. And again, this takes me back to, you know, what Walt's original idea of the park was, kind of a recreation of his childhood days back in Marceline. So you've got the band playing, mostly old people listening because all the young kids are going to go off and try the Jungle Cruise or things like that. But this is an idea to me that made it show how quiet certain parts of Disneyland could be, how you didn't have to have everything done on a thrill ride. You didn't have to have everything done with gigantic floats and, you know, all the entertainment things that people expect today. So obviously, if you put this bandstand in the park today, people would think it was a waste of space. It only lasted a few years at Disneyland. It's been relocated. I think it's in Newport Beach today. But so it's one of the few things of Disneyland that is not there that is still somewhere today. Back at 1955, too, you could also go and visit the Disneyland had the Mickey Mouse Club Circus, which had the Mouseketeers there for a few photo ops. They weren't there performing every day, but these are pictures that came from the Viewmaster set. People realized, just like I talked at a different one of these talks about the 64 World's Fair. Why would you put a circus at the 64 World's Fair when everybody could go to a circus any particular time you wanted to? And that became part of why the Mickey Mouse Club Circus failed. You're going to be paying money to go to Disneyland. In this particular case, in summer, you got to sit inside a very hot, non-air conditioned tent, but you got to see an animal act. You got to see a lion. You got to see some trained dogs. You could see that at any circus. And there were so many small circuses traveling the country at that point in time that people just did not go to the circus. It was one of the first failures at Disneyland to be replaced. This was when I got a real kick out of. Kathy and I were in the archives doing some work looking for stuff for my Zorro presentation, and came across these pictures of people out in the river. And it was like, what are they doing? You know, why are people out in the rivers of America? And the folks at Disney didn't quite know at the time, so we had to go and do some research. By the way, look on this particular picture, and there's a small bridge off to about the 3 o'clock position on the picture here, and some people looking down at it. I'll be getting to that bridge later on, but just keep fixed in your mind where that bridge is, going from basically where the Adventureland is to today over where the Pirates would be. So remember the bridge. There'll be a test. But looked into this. It was a Kiwanis Day event held across the United States to try to do something for kids that were members of Kiwanis clubs. And at Disneyland, their thing was to have a giant swimming contest, and people were going swimming back and forth and doing laps and races. And for anybody that's worked at the park these days, you'll know you do not want to put a foot in that water. I think they change out the water every 500,000 years or something. I mean, it's really toxic. If you go in it, you have to get gamma globulin shots and stuff. But back in 55, they had just filled it up. It was pretty brand new water, so still relatively clean. So we're going to jump up to 56 now, and we go out to Tom Sawyer Island, a very barren shoreline, a new attraction out there. Everything's still, in the pre-OSHA days, you could climb up to things and they didn't worry if you fell off. You could have a spinning rock. They didn't worry if you fell off. You could have a balancing rock. They didn't worry if you got your fingers crushed. It was a much more happier place back then. You also had an Indian village where actual Indians would come out and they would do demonstrations of things like archery. Again, look at the hills out there behind it, a few trees growing up, but a very barren sort of thing compared to the forested areas you see around the park today. You also had Indians that were out there to talk about the tribal customs, talk about their dances. Matter of fact, I think the next one, this is coming up later, a picture of one of the dances. You had a tree house out in the island you could actually climb up to, and they got a kick out of the kid with no shirt on, starting to think of all the pictures you had of Disneyland. I only have one or two that are showing kids out there without shirts on or anything. So just funny how one thing will catch your eye out of thousands. This was an interesting one. Park's open and they're working like mad, working on the park. I mean, we don't see this sort of thing today for the most part. A lot of the work is done at the nighttime hours. Back in the days when I worked at the park, it was closed Mondays and Tuesdays, so a lot of this was done then. But when they opened up this particular area, the Storybook Land, they didn't have money for it. So it was basically, as the Disney folks at the time said, a giant muddy ditch. So they decided in 1956 they needed to do something about these bare hills of dirt, and they're putting in this patchwork quilt right in the middle of the day. So much for keeping the show element apart from the rest of it. And this gives us an idea of what it looked like when it was done. All sorts of different cactus planted in different patterns in that. Again, dirt. We're looking now over towards where actually this became Big Thunder Ranch, and now we're over towards where the Star Wars land is. But where did all the dirt come from? Well, when you dig a river, what do? You end up with dirt, and you pile it up, and it barricades or hides where other things are. We have the old Skyway. The initial buckets were round. I think they only had 2 seats in them. Didn't hold an awful lot of people. We have this Swiss Chalet in the background, sadly gone now, the Skyway station from the time. Okay, come on, mouse. Conestoga wagon. You could go and take tours around the area on a wagon. They would put a banner on it when it was time to publicize Westward Ho the wagon. So Disney never misses a trick, but you could get a tour around on that. Again, another view of the area. Again, dirt, just nothing out there in 1956. Today, if you were taking this picture, you have Big Thunder in the background behind you, but back then you had dirt and a crane going up as more work was underway. Main Street had different vendors on it. You had the Beacons Van and Storage Company. They were the official storage locker and parcel check area of Disneyland. You had the fire truck, which I don't think I've ever personally seen out on the street. It's always parked in the fire department back behind it. But back at that point in time, you had the horses that could take you for a ride up and down Main Street. You had Dumbo. This poor little gal's not having too good a time, is she? She seems to be crying about something. But if you look at this Dumbo, it's interesting, the Dumbos we have today. There's a mechanism there to make Dumbo's ears flap. And that was the original design concept. As you flew around the circle and you were in your flying Dumbo, Dumbo, of course, makes everybody fly by his ears. Well, they had not tested this in advance, had not worked it out in advance. And it turned out the mechanism to make the ears flap was both very heavy and unreliable. So you see a lot of these pictures with the mechanism, but I have yet to see pictures of the ears actually moving. So if you look at videos of this or old films of the time, Dumbo's going around, they eventually decided that they needed to take the mechanism out so that they could actually, what would happen is you'd get 2 kids like this could lift up. But if you had somebody who was a larger, like say in the back, you can see a dad and his kids, they may not be able to get Dumbo maybe more than a foot or 2 off the ground. So they had to take the mechanism out and then recast the Dumbo ride with fixed ears, which is what we still have today. We're up in the Skyway, of course. If you look down below, those are the ill-fated Phantom boats. These were boats you could take out for a ride on that lake that's out there. And unfortunately, they overheated like mad. If you look down at the turquoise sort of one in the bottom right corner, the hatch is off the motor area in the back. At first, they were covered in a hatch, and it looked nice and sleek. They found that that overheated. They took the hatches off. They found out they overheated. So these boats were constantly going out. People were getting stuck out in the middle of this lagoon. They'd have to send a cast member out in a boat. I've got one picture somewhere of a cast member that went out in a boat to tow the people back. His boat broke down, and there was a third boat towing them all back. So the Phantom boats didn't last particularly long. Take a look at the Autopia. You can notice if you look at the track, there's no center rail. We'll take a look more at that coming up. So we have the patchwork quilt in place here, but for folks that are fans of this area, there is no Skull Rock. That was another great area, gave it a lot of character and atmosphere, particularly for nighttime shots of Skull Rock. The skull lights, or the eye sockets were all lit up, but these are things that were all added into the park later on. One of the things that I spent a lot of time when I was at Disneyland was going to the Mickey Mouse Club Theater. I think they show the exact same 3 cartoons every day when I was there, but I liked it because it was air conditioned. So if I was working in the park and doing something for some period of time, I could duck in there and get into some air conditioning. And it's funny, people often ask, do you ever see yourself in pictures? Has anybody spotted themselves in pictures? And I've got one of this theater from the 60s about this angle. And this guy had written to me and said, you know, we went out there, we lost our camera, we don't have any pictures of our family there. Do you have any pictures from this particular date? And amazingly, I did. And I found a picture looking down at this area. Off to the right, there are restrooms. And in the picture, there's a mother and father and a bored-looking girl standing there, you know, waiting for somebody. And obviously the son who had written to me was waiting in the restroom, and the rest of the family was waiting for him. But it was kind of neat to pick that up. Just yesterday, somebody spotted his mother and an aunt in one of my World's Fair photos. So that was kind of fun. California Adventure, anybody recognize it? Looks a little different, doesn't it? So looking out from the train station across the sea of cars, of course, now California Adventure, but back then a giant parking lot. And this is one I got a real kick out of. You know, with all the things today you have to worry about, people running around Main Street with guns. They had actual gunfights that would take place out in Frontierland. The sheriff would come, get in a shot with this shady gambler. Other guys would come and try to rob things. They'd shoot, they'd fall off the roof of the buildings. But this guy, I guess he was going on a break or something, looks very out of place. But can you imagine today, you know, having this sort of character run around the park? Wait, we do. We have stormtroopers with rifles, thousands of them running around. But this is a street entertainment from back in the 50s and went into the 60s. When you're done with the day at the park, you can go across the street to the brand new Disneyland Hotel. And for the folks that have been anywhere over there lately, you cannot recognize anything from back in these days. We're going to jump up to 1957. The shops, many different shops. A lot of the people that had put shops on Main Street at that time were small businesses, like Ruggles China here. It was a licensee. What Walt had done was rent out space to a whole variety of companies. You had a company that sold women's lingerie, the Yale Lock Company, Wurlitzer Oregon. These people had all businesses that they basically rented the space. They actually employed the people that worked inside the shops. Disneyland didn't. And over time, Disney started buying a bunch of these back. It's funny, they actually had a working group, the Disneyland Licensee Association. I've got the minutes from some of their meetings, and they'll be talking about what they don't like at Disneyland and what Disneyland should do for them, and then Disneyland will be back about what they needed to do. But Disney decided that it was too hard to keep up the quality of these shops, that, again, if the employee didn't work for them, if the merchandise wasn't approved by them, they were constantly having to chase them down. They also realized that if these people were making a profit, that's a profit that Disney could make. So at every option they had, when they had a buyout clause in people's leases, they would take it, and eventually all the shops became Disney-owned shops. Again, very different sort of view of Main Street. Actually, you can see the pavement for one thing. If you look in the back, there's a sign there for Liberty Street. We'll take a quick look over at that in a second. This was a planned area that Disney was going to expand into. It was called over time International Street, Liberty Street, And if you look at the signs, the first one's from 55. It tells us International Street's coming in 56. Now it's coming in 57. Oh, we're changing our name. Oh, we're changing our year. Never got built. I talked about this when I did my Disney and the World's Fair talk. It was a lot of what gave the impetus eventually to the Hall of Presidents. But this is another great way to date your pictures of Disneyland if you happen to spot this particular corner. Every now and then it pauses. Oh, one of the great things from the early days of Disneyland, the TWA moon rocket. This thing was really spectacular. People would go into the building. You can see just off to the side where it says "Rocket to the Moon." Go in, and people would actually be convinced they were going up in a rocket. You know, the chairs would move, the sound would fill the room. Absolutely a wonderful design. Steam would come venting out of this rocket as you walk by it. So a wonderful, iconic part of the old Tomorrowland. In this particular case, we're going on the up at the heading up to the station to go to the Skyway. But if you look in the background, there's a giant pile of dirt. Again, a lot of dirt. They dug a lot of rivers. It all had to go somewhere because this was all orange groves beforehand. But they needed to come up with a name rather than what's the big pile of dirt in the middle of Disneyland? Let's call it Holiday Hill. So you could go and walk on Holiday Hill and have a picnic lunch up there and look down at the rest of the park. And what became of Holiday Hill? Well, that's now the Matterhorn. Obviously, the Matterhorn is totally different, built on top of it, but that's where it was. This was another ill-fated adventure. This was the Viewliner. It was a futuristic train that would take people around. So you had the old steam trains representing the world of yesterday, the Viewliner representing the world of tomorrow. And it was basically built on a giant car chassis. It actually had a gear shifter, everything like a regular car. It didn't go real fast. It had some issues if you filled it up with a lot of people. It was basically neat looking, kind of unengineered, so it didn't last too long. The Skyway gave us some great views. You can see in the background here, that's all where the Small World attraction is and everything today. Back then, it was all construction areas, just staging areas, things were being built. The House of the Future, Monsanto, was a great addition to the park, the plastic house that we were all going to be living in. As everybody probably knows, when they eventually went to take this out and they came in with a wrecking ball, the wrecking ball bounced off it. It was so strong. So the house was eventually taken out using chainsaws. Again, we're looking out across the river. The gazebo there, it had shown up in the picture earlier, the guys in the water. This gazebo jutted out into the river, and it was another area they had a lot of live musicians would come in and perform out there. And this picture is taken from that bridge that I mentioned earlier. We'll get back to the bridge. Jumping up to 58, another vanished attraction, the Midget Autopia. We had the main Autopias for the adults to drive around, but the kids wanted to have something that they could do without the adults. So there's a rail for this one, unlike the regular Autopia. Much more scaled down cars. I think there's a second shot here coming up too. You would drive around and you would drive up to a barn. The door would open. You could drive through. It would let you drive out the other side. This took up too much real estate for what they figured they were getting out of it. They scrapped the ride. It was sent to Marceline, Walt's old hometown. It fell into disrepair, and I think they're still trying to get it back on track. But the Midget Autopia is, again, a vanished part of Disneyland. This one I got a kick out of. It's the Storybook Land, but if you look over to the right, there's a guy on it. I think today, the last time I've looked, I think for years it's been basically just women giving the tours. But there were a lot of times back in these days you could see men doing it. And the costumes, obviously he's not wearing anything particularly themed. So they changed their the design and the decor over time. But this was also a big year. As I mentioned, Holiday Hill was there at the beginning of the year. It wasn't there at the end of the year because the Matterhorn was going into place. So were the submarines. There was just so many things, the monorail, all these things being added into Disneyland to a giant year of expansion for 1959. The House of the Future, again, if you go to the park today, you can see the concrete base for this in a garden area. It's used for character meet and greets and that sort of thing, but unfortunately is the House of the Future is of the past. There is Holiday Hill in the background again. The Disneyland band has gone through a variety of uniforms. I gather from what notes I've read, this was their winter uniform. The Yacht Bar restaurant was behind them. Again, all this was changed when Tomorrowland was redone in later years. Aunt Jemima at the Aunt Jemima kitchen. This woman would come out and greet the characters, and of course, pancakes were the primary thing there. A lot of these restaurants were again done by licensees. So you had Don DeFore's Silver Banjo restaurant, Aunt Jemima restaurant. Walt just didn't have the money to build and staff these operations when the park was brand new. So he went out to various companies. They brought in their own operations. Stouffer Foods ran one of the restaurants. As mentioned, Don DeFore had another. But these are all views from years ago. It's interesting. The park's only 4 years old at this point in time, and yet scaffolding going up and lots of work being done on the castle. And it's an interesting story in this one. Evidently, they put this up real fast and worked on it real fast because Roy Disney was out of town and Walt didn't want him to see what he was doing. What he's doing is adding a lot of gold gilt to the castle towers. When he had first built the castle, he didn't have the money to put gold on there that he wanted to. Roy was out of town, and when he got back, it was like, what happened? How'd you do this to the castle? And well, it's magic. But it was interesting because the two brothers had constant feuds about money, and this was a particularly interesting one to time it and get it in and spiff up the castle. Now I've seen pictures of what the castle looks like today that they were supposed to have it open for the 65th anniversary. I really prefer it back in this style than the bright blue colors that they've used today. If people can hear my guard dogs barking in the background, the mail lady is here. It's a great part of scheduling around this every week. Got a kick out of this. Again, if you look here, Gibson greeting cards way back before we all got to know Hallmark at the park. But what I found interesting about this one was the popcorn wagons just plopped down right on Main Street. We don't see that today. They're all done in places like out at the hub or out of town square off to the side. But you can imagine if you're lining up for a parade or anything, you'd have this popcorn wagon sitting right there. And it's, again, just the things they've learned over time or how the theming has improved over the years. Mentioned the circus, a shot here of the circus. The tent was coming down. It was the end of the time, one of the final performances. But this was, again, not a huge success, but a big part of Disneyland history. Jungle Cruise had a 2-story dock. I don't know why they took down the upper story like they did, but it had a kind of neat looking motif to it. Anybody getting nightmares from the characters? They've certainly changed over the years. You've seen some really horrific pictures when the park first opened of the Mickey and Minnie characters because Disney, again, didn't have the money to go and get his own characters. He borrowed costumes from the Ice Capades. So from a distance, if you're in a giant arena, these guys might look pretty neat out there in the ice. Walking around the park, they were not so spectacular. And big thing came in this particular year. They needed to do a lot of work on the river. When they had first put the river in place, they realized as much water as they put into it, they needed to refill it every night because it leaked like a sieve. So they relined it for opening day. But over time, they needed to come back and do more work on it. So here's a view of them ripping up the whole river, repaving it to make it more watertight. You can see off to the left a rail there. That's from the track that the Mark Twain rides on. A lot of people argue whether or not the boats are on tracks. Well, the Columbia's on a track, the Mark Twain's on a track. Everything else, the rafts and the canoes, all those are free floating. But there's a whole group out there in one of the Disneyland history groups that just loves to get pictures of Disney dirt, as they call it. So here's my contribution to the Disney dirt fanatics. Back then, you had a lot more live entertainment than you have at the park today. There were various groups that these guys would dress up on Main Street area, play with the old Keystone Cop motif, run back to wardrobe, change and put on different costumes, show up in Frontierland and Western garb, run back, get something else, look like they were near the Matterhorn and Swiss yodeling type costumes. So this was a great way to keep people entertained when they were waiting for attractions, waiting in line for restaurants. We don't see as much of it today, and part of it I'll just be honest with you, Disney's gotten cheaper. The second thing is you just don't have this amount of open space right now that these groups would perform in, because as soon as they start playing, people would just clog up the area even worse than it is. Out in Tomorrowland, you could go and take model boats for a ride. You could also fly model airplanes around this whole fenced-in area. It was known as the Thimble Drone, and again, you had remote-controlled airplanes with motors on them. You could fly them on a string going around. You could go and take radio-controlled boats and go, and you could bring your own boat in, or you could watch, people doing them out there. Another view of the Viewliner. It's crossing over one of the attractions that I really missed. It's really corny, but it's the motorboat cruise. Great little thing. Get out in your motorboat, putt around, and go through the rapids and all that. And again, unfortunately, it's now gone. This one I found interesting because there's a cast member sitting off to the left side, and nobody's been able to figure out, was he there to stop people from doing something, particularly like were they so close to the land at this particular point, were people jumping out of the boats onto the land. But again, 2 vanished Disneyland attractions for the price of 1. Again, show is a big thing today. It wasn't so much in these days. You had this barge out there which has a dredge on it that they were using to keep the water area clean. You have a rowboat that the workers would just row out to the island if they needed to do some work. Today, you just don't see this sort of stuff unless there's an emergency going on. Everything is hidden much more. So Disneyland 59, big year, as again mentioned, all the things that were being built and added. So you can see that these are, in just 1 year, they're adding the submarine voyage, the monorail, a new Autopia in Fantasyland, the Matterhorn bobsleds, the motorboat cruise, the Skyway Glacier. All these things were big things you could come out and enjoy in 59. They would change the banner over time to let you know what was going on. This picture is a little damaged in the front, but it does give you an idea of how they would put up these signs. Keep a look at that water fountain there in the center. That's another quiz we'll come back to. The Fantasyland of the time, you had the information booths, and just everything was done in a whole different style than we have today. I like the current Fantasyland, but I also like the old Fantasyland with its court jester type styling and the very bright colors. One thing that's interesting also is look at the Matterhorn. If you look at different pictures of the Matterhorn over the years, they can never ever agree on how much snow the Matterhorn should have on it and how far down it should come. So in various years, like this one, it's brand new, it's up at the top. Other years, it's way down, then it goes back up. So someday, maybe they'll come up with a consistent look for the Matterhorn. The Snow White ride, the ride vehicles were not particularly elegant. We also see that they don't have anything to keep you from falling out. So again, things have changed over time. You could go back again, and they had the Indian Village was still there at this particular point in time. Mentioned they had dances that would go on. This is a well-attended area. It became the site of Bear Country for those trying to locate it. Back at the time when you went into the park, you had all these wonderful posters that were outside for the various attractions. Very collectible these days. They would take artists, and you could go and both get your art, your caricature done, but they would also have art that was for sale. Remember I mentioned the musicians before. They were all around the park, all over, but in this particular case, you could come in and just buy art. So in some times they had plastic flowers you could buy at the flower garden, but they also tried doing art festivals to get local artists to come in and sell. The submarines, of course, were new, big addition to the Disneyland world. Walt liked to boast that he had, I think, was the 3rd largest fleet of submarines in the world at the time. Again, a nice view of Tomorrowland of the time, the signage being real different. Space Bar Restaurant, the giant eagle there because it was being sponsored by Atlantic Richfield, sponsoring the Autopia. Got a kick out of this. The rocket jets, very plain rockets. And that's because these were not designed or built for Disneyland. There was a commercial off-the-shelf ride that you can find in many theme parks of the time. They bought it, put it in place, and over the years they took it out and modernized it with the this sleek design that we have today. But this was, again, life back then. It was what they could afford and what they put into place. Holiday Hill again, the big lift that's there in the center is the exact center of where the Matterhorn is today. This is when I got a kick out of. This is on the Columbia, and they had a real life monkey that would go around and sail around as the cruise mascot. I have other pictures of Main Street with a organ grinder from the 60s. And the thought today of putting chimps out in the park near the guests would absolutely make a lawyer go into a catatonic shock, I'm sure. But if you took the cruise around the rivers of America, you could look up and see this monkey running all over the ropes up above your head. We'll hop over to the Disneyland Hotel real quick. We've gotten tired, I'm sure, from our day at the park, but I got Disneyland Hotel. I love the architecture of these steel beams and everything that looked. We had a putting green. Again, none of this is going to be familiar to anybody that goes over there today. When I worked at Disney, one of my bosses had an office at the Disneyland Hotel, and it was really neat. I would, my office was over in the admin building back behind Grand Primeval World. So I had a meeting with my boss. I'd walk over to Tomorrowland, get on the monorail, ride over to the hotel. It was great. I loved visiting the old Disneyland Hotel. We had all these old shops there again. A bunch of them were done by different licensees, but over time, Disney started buying them out because they wanted to keep the quality and the money. So those were pictures that I was able to easily identify to each of the years when they were taken. Sometimes the person that took it wrote it on the slide. Others, there was something in particular I could tie it down to. And now we're going to just jump into a hodgepodge of miscellaneous shots from various years over the 50s. When you walked into the park, it was interesting. I love this shot. There's a bunch of newspapers there. And they were actual newspapers. The Herald Express, you could get the LA Times, Orange County's paper. But over at this table with the very, very, very cleverly done Disneyland sign, you could buy the Disneyland newspaper, which was a souvenir thing. And I just got a kick out of this. They certainly didn't put much money into signage or theming on this particular shot. 1950, I think this is 55 or 56. You certainly love the way folks dressed back then. But this information kiosk, they had all sorts of little stands and kiosks and everything scattered around the park at the time that over years they consolidated into larger gift stores. What is interesting to see how some things like the Emporium pretty much looks exactly today like it did back then. So certain things have held up very well over time. Other things they've gone off and improved. Remember before I mentioned the water fountain in that one shot? Well, this is early shot, probably the first year. I don't know for sure. There's no flowers at all. But this water fountain has not got any decor to it. And the other shot, if you remember, it had a nice wooden box around it to hide the plumbing. Well, when the park first opened, they didn't have a lot of water fountains. As they said, they had a problem paying the plumbers, and they had a choice. Do you put water make the bathrooms work, or do you go and put water fountains out? When they did put a water fountain out, it was basically a very, very bare pipe sticking out of the ground with a bubbler type attachment on top of it. Entrance to the old Tomorrowland, the TWA rocket in the back, the clock, world clock in the future, avenue of the flags on either side. Circle Vision, the original Circorama version off to the left, the Hall of Chemistry to the right. This was a version of Tomorrowland that I never saw in person that I would have really enjoyed. And I cannot imagine how hot and uncomfortable Mr. Spaceman had to be walking around. Having been a character, the suits are bad enough, but having to wear that plexiglass thing over your head and walking around and getting baked in the sun, it had to be incredibly bad. Again, the rivers, if you look at this river, there's a fishing pier out there. There's people trying their luck. We have the Conestoga wagon going in the background. The town of Rainbow Ridge is built up there for you would go off and take your trip off to nature's wonderland. And I mentioned the bridge before. If you look at this picture, it's Fowler's Harbor, and there's a whole bunch of Jungle Cruise boats in it. And if you go to the park today, you know that the River of America is not connected to the Jungle Cruise. So how did the boats get there? Well, back in these days, the Jungle Cruise and the Rivers of America were all part of the same waterway. They actually are today, but the connection is gone. The bridge is gone, and everything goes through pipes between them now. But back in this point in time, when they needed to do work on the Jungle Cruise, they would just open up the bridge, take all the Jungle Cruise boats off the track, take them over here to Fowler's Harbor, park them, close the sluice gate, drain the Jungle Cruise, do all the work they needed to do, and then repeat the process, put them back. But it was a real eye opener. And this, again, the colors in this picture are not great. This thing was almost jet black. And, at some point you get to the point of no return. But when I was working, this was like, what the hell are those boats doing there? And it became an interesting little research project. And that's one of the things I enjoy. You find some of these things in pictures and you just spot something in the background. The next thing you know, you're calling the archives, they're calling you, you're digging in the files, and you're having a great time. Again, the Indian village out there, gone today. This is a burning settler's cabin. The settler is lying there, as the people in the Mark Twain always say, he's wearing his arrow shirt. What I got a kick out of this one is that they would theme it over time during the year to change the planting out there. So if you look over to the far left on this, there's a bunch of corn stalks that are all gathered up. And that was something they did for a short period of time. And after a while, now we no longer have the burning, we don't have the corn stalk, and we don't have the settler. This one, I got a kick out of the peaceful Indian village. If you look at it today, the major thing that's different is the canoe out front. It's sticking out over the water here. In later years, they added a small boy and his faithful dog that are out on the canoe waving to the boat as they come by. So I find it interesting to see how many things that you could have just left like this, but they went to the time, the effort, the money to go and build another AA figure, put them out on there and have them wave there. And it's the thing that made me appreciate working for Disney, that they were always adding new things and plussing the show to improve upon things that could have been just left for status quo. And again, we have a picture of Fowler's Harbor. Nothing behind it at this point in time. It later ended up becoming Bear Country, Splash Mountain, and all that. But for the folks that don't know it, Fowler's Harbor is actually a dry dock facility that you can take the Mark Twain or you can take the Columbia in, close the gates, drain it down, do the work on the hull, and do the repair work that had to be done. So Walt didn't want to build it, but Admiral Fowler convinced him, if you're going to have a Navy, you're going to need to maintain your Navy. So Admiral Fowler got his dry dock, and in honor, we have Fowler's Dock. Another thing that's well gone, well, two things well gone from the park at this point in time. You had burro rides that you could go out and ride through the Nature Wonderland area, and you had the train in the back. And the train over the years came in different paint schemes. It'd be black at one time, green in another. I think it's red some others. So again, you had the town of Rainbow Ridge behind it, and that's now the home for Big Thunder Railway. The keel boats were a great ride, very popular. They were copied after the ones used for the Davy Crockett and the River Pirates movie. They, again, not on rails. They were a great ride until people found out, if you look at this picture, this shows you what doomed the keel boats. Everybody's up top. We got a better view from up top. There was more of a breeze up top. Unfortunately, all the weight was now up top. And on one particular day, they had a very big crowd up top. It was windier than an average day, and the keelboat driver made a sharper than average turn, and the keelboat flipped over. And at that point, that was the end of the keelboats. Luckily, nobody got hurt. I mean, it could have been very serious if anybody had gotten trapped underneath the boat. But that was the end of the keelboats. This is, again, a different view of what you have today. This set of lions is obviously ripping this poor zebra to shreds. Today, they're all up at a Pride Rock sort of setting, and they joke about how the lions are protecting the sleeping zebra. But there was no doubt, particularly at other views when you saw this shot, that the lions were not happy you were getting anywhere near their noontime meal. Again, pictures of Rainbow Ridge, all gone. Actually, some pieces, smaller pieces, were still moved for Big Thunder. When I worked at Disney, I mentioned in '76, I started, the park was closed Mondays and Tuesdays. and you could walk through this whole area, and it was really great to walk the old burro trails, go out and watch sometimes the water jets would be working, the bubbling mud pots would be going. But on the time of bird migration season, this was really great because I'd walk out on the trail. There was an old rusted metal chair sitting under one of the trees, and I would just sit under that, watch the birds coming and landing on the river. There was nobody around but me. One time a security guard came by and told me I was sitting in his chair. He liked to come out and watch the birds too. But this was one of my favorite parts of the park. So sorry to see it gone. You could go for your stagecoach rides. Again, these were very popular. Again, they managed to put everybody up on top for the exact same reason as the keel boats, and for the exact same reason the stagecoach ride stopped. We're getting near the end. I had some souvenir slides I got that you might enjoy. That this was when Disneyland first opened. They had just managed to get the floral Mickey in place, and you see they didn't even have his mouth filled in yet. But they needed to get the park open. They needed to get the first pictures taken. And when you got to the Disneyland in the first couple of days, this is the sort of thing that was not uncommon to see. Again, nice view of the early Tomorrowland. Back in Tomorrowland, you could go and see the sets from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The movie had been made up at the studio. They took them, moved them down to Disneyland. You could actually wander right through it, see the actual sets used for the movie. This organ was repurposed. It's now the organ from the Haunted Mansion. Richfield Autopia, again, we had no rails out there. Big bumpers around these things, and people driving around having a great time smacking into each other. The Casey Jr. train, as I mentioned earlier, the muddy ditch around the Storybook Land was not done. Well, when the park opened, Casey Jr. still had all sorts of stuff. They were still sculpting and building the hills around there to fill them in. And this is another set of souvenir slides, kind of interesting. Again, these were all bright red. Luckily I could restore them, but I really got a kick out of some of them. I mean, you would not know this was Anaheim, would you? Yeah, they're out on the burro ride. They're coming across the bridge there. He's helping the little girl keep her burro going. But the river's flowing. The trees have been planted. The area hasn't quite grown in. But this again, 1 year earlier, this was orange groves. Absolutely astonishing what they accomplished in a year's period of time. Again, mentioned earlier the boats. Well, it got captured on one of the souvenir slides. If you notice in the other picture I had of the Jungle Cruise boats, they were all in the 90-degree angle from here. So this is a totally different time. They took the boats over, put them out there, and did the work on it. So even on the souvenir slide, they managed to capture the Jungle Cruise boats on the rivers of America. Interesting shot here. I've been trying to place exactly where this was taken because there's a big paved road next to the train here. I saw a shot yesterday somebody had posted of the Beacons van line riding down this road, pacing the train. So it's interesting because there's no road that I know of. Maybe when we get to the open discussion area, somebody can fill us in on it. But there's no open road like that I can immediately place for where this particular shot was taken. Oh, there's one more picture. It didn't come out. I got to get this last picture. Hang on. It's too good not to see. Okay, here we go. Everybody see that? Let me see if it goes up here again. Okay, there. This is a souvenir slide that they showed, and again, hang on a second. I think I have to do screen share. Get myself perplexed here. So 1 second. Screen share. Okay, there we go. This is a really great Disneyland souvenir. I mean, this guy is as dead could be, and this was what you could buy and take home and show your kids of the days that you went to Disneyland. These are the end of the photos for today. Again, for folks that are new, I post the schedule for each week on my site, worldsfairphotos.com/Zoom. It also will take you out there. If anybody is interested, I do offer Disneyland and Disney World and theme park photos on CD, and you can find those out there. There's also a page out there on how to you go restoring these things, about scanning them, about taking, bringing back the colors, taking out the scratches, that sort of thing. And I encourage anybody that has their own collection of vintage photos to drag them out of the closet, because a year from now they're going to have deteriorated more than they were. 2 years from now it's going to be worse. Time doesn't stand still for the chemical process in these things, or for the mold or whatever. So it's kind of great fun to take them. The only thing I can tell you, it's addictive. Carol has not seen anything but the back of my head for the last 18 years. So she's been very, very understanding as I do this. I used to do, when I had a full-time job working, I'd be all day budget schedules, firing people, hiring people, doing that. I'd come home, work on these pictures, and how do I get that scratch off that lady's face? And I'd be working on that, and I wouldn't be thinking about all the other stuff. So that's the chat. Folks can feel free to unmute themselves. And let me just see what people are chatting here. Again, I can't see these during it, so let me see what I can try to come up with. Where was the bandstand located? Good question. It was down near the hub area. I'm not sure if it was quite where Carnation Gardens was. Was that in that particular area? Disney have their own construction crews, or they contract Teamsters. That I don't know. I do not know how the park was originally built. My family was a canoe and got swamped by a bigger boat. We were taken to the costume room and wore costumes where they dried our clothes. Yeah, they're real good at stuff like that. When I worked there, there was an accident one day that you just couldn't believe. It was somebody was getting out of Small World, and they made a mistake, and the next boat came in and hit her boat, and she flew up out of the water down into the, out of the boat down into the water. Well, they were on her, like getting her to wardrobe really fast to dry her off, get her some other clothes, and here, just sign this release. I mean, they are so smart about getting people to sign. And then she amazingly had been wearing a coat that had a fur collar on it. So then they got turned over to the lawyers because the water ruined the fur collar and had to be replaced. But yeah, actually, the wardrobe department was great. One day I went to Disneyland, and my zipper broke on my pants. It was great. What am I going to do all day long? Well, go down to wardrobe and take off your pants, sit there with a towel on your lap, and the lady sits over there and sews the zipper. And I said, oh man, I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe I have to have it done. The lady says, I do about 4 of these a week. So it was a great product to, Joey, that was no monkey, that was my nephew. Well, your nephew had quite a career there. So let's see. Oh yeah, that is the Sawyer 3D Viewmaster reels. One talk I may do in the future is about restoring the 3D slides, and I do sell them on my website in 3D, and I send a set of glasses with it. The trouble, if I want to do 3D here, unless people have glasses, they're probably not going to see much. Oh, we're getting another delivery. That's the nice thing about being home. Amazon comes here all the time. So anyway, that's the slides for this week. Memories, thoughts, or anything that people would like to chime in with?
Just a quick question, Bill. How long does it take you for a typical restoration? I know it varies quite a bit, but if you get one of those really off-color ones with scratches and things, how long does it actually take to fix that?
It really varies. Sometimes they go very quickly. I mean, Kodachrome was a great process, and a lot of the pictures from the 50s have held up pretty well in Kodachrome. So it takes about 2 minutes for the scanner to go through, and the scanner does probably about 80% of the work, taking out the scratches. The souvenir slides are the ones that turn really right, or if people used, God forbid, Agfachrome or some other slides, they turn purple. That took a while. So it takes about 3 minutes to do the scan. And then it depends on the picture. The one of the monorail that was so scratched up and so overexposed, that probably took me about 2 hours. And I was just determined to get it. It was a great shot. It was all scratched up, and it's addictive. It's like if you have a bowl of chips. Remember the old ad, I bet you can't eat just one. Well, it's like, I'll take out this scratch. We'll take out that scratch. We'll take out this scratch. The next thing you know, 2 hours have gone by. I would say the average one takes me about 15 minutes or so to do the average one. Again, scan it, color balance it, sharpen it, and every now and then I do have some that I just say, picture of so and such damaged. So, I mean, you get some that you just, it's not worth it. Maybe if somebody's paying me, you know, to do it, I would do it. But a lot of them, I just do it because it really passes the time and takes my mind off other things. The trouble is I've got 50-something thousand pictures so far between the World's Fair and the theme parks and everything. So if you start figuring 50,000 pictures at 15 minutes a picture, it can explain why I never clean up my garage.
What software do you use?
I scan with, I have a bunch of scanners. I'm looking around, folks can't see it. I have Nikon scanners for the 35mm slides. I have Epson scanners for the large stuff and negatives. Yeah, I have a variety of different things. So I scan it generally with the native software for the particular scanner. That creates what's called a TIFF file. I then bring that into Photoshop, and in Photoshop, there's a number of ways you can restore the colors. Photoshop has a tool that does some of it. There's some Photoshop plugins, and those are the things I show on the website, some examples of before and after. So I restore the color, and then some of it just starts going into manual color balancing. If there's a picture of somebody and you know that you know, they're next to something that's black, you can set the black tone for that. If there's something that's white, you can set the white tone. Sometimes you just know it because you've done 200 other pictures of the same area. But a lot of it's subjective. You know, is the red the exact same red that it was when it was at the park? It's hard to say in some cases. And in some cases, you just can't get there. I mean, like the shot I had of the spaceman, that was a commercial slide I had grabbed, had faded to almost nothing. I've got it back to something. It's in my, I'll get back to it again some other day, maybe pile. But yeah, it's easier to do than people think. If Photoshop is absolutely essential for it, and you can get the plugins to make the changes to it. And again, even if you scan it and you don't fix it, you can always go and fix it later. But if you don't scan it now, I got into this because my brother and I had gone to Philmont Scout Ranch in 1967, and he had lost his pictures. So I said, oh, I'll make you copies of mine. I took them out. Oh my God, they've turned red. They've got scratched, whatever. So I started looking into photos, you know, stuff. Then when I worked for Disney, I bought every one of the Panaview souvenir slides that you could get. It was nice, I got the cast member discount, but they also had great views on them. I took those out, and they had been carefully stored in proper climate-controlled conditions and everything. Bright red. I was devastated. So I started looking, how do you bring these photos back from the dead? And went down that slippery hole that I have yet to get out of again.
I apologize for the noise before when the mail lady came to the door. We have these guard dogs that hear it before she comes. Bill, I just wanted to let you know, and everybody, we had a couple of friends that had trouble logging in today. It kept giving them error messages, but they both got in eventually. I don't know how. We'll have to find out, but I don't know what went on.
Don't know. We'll have to find out. By the way, the guard dogs are very, very nasty. They will eat you alive, so don't come here to take my pictures. We joke about it. I was putting this presentation together on Thursday night at 12:05. Somebody tried to break into the house, so it was.
Oh my! Yeah,
that was an eye opener. So, but the guard dogs were on duty. I was on duty. Hey, Dave, you got your hand up?
So there's an interesting. Most people don't know story about wardrobe at the studio. Two things. First of all, if you were invited at the last minute to go to the Academy Awards, you could go to wardrobe and they would give you a tuxedo or loan you a tuxedo. And then secondly, we were working on a camera to go to the North Sea and photograph original photography for the Energy Pavilion, talking about petroleum development and all that. And we wanted to test it for low temperature operation because it's -10 or something. Prudhoe Bay, Alaska certainly was cold. So we rented a 40-foot van that was parked on the back lot that we could get down to that temperature. And the guy on my staff that was doing the test, Dave Barnett, and it was very cold in there and he had no clothes. So he went down to wardrobe. They loaned him the costume from Island of the Top of the World that had the big
Parka.
parka and all that. And I have a picture of him. I guess I don't have the picture, but I remember one day saying, "Where's Dave?" And he's always back at the van. And I go out there and he's coming out of the van with his parka on. And it was just classic that we, in those days, we thought nothing, because it was a small company, big company, but certainly the studio lot was still small. And people would think nothing of just, let's go over to wardrobe and borrow whatever we need. And it was great.
Yeah, I used to borrow stuff for Halloween. But, you know, when you mentioned the Academy Awards, it brought me a memory from my first year at Disney. Because again, I'm out here from the East. Entertainment's brand new and everything. I'm super excited working in a movie studio. And I opened my mail one day, and there's an invitation to go to the Academy Awards. And you know, it's wow, this is really great. I'm a nobody, and I'm getting to go to the Academy Awards, and I'm really excited about it. And I'm looking at it, and oh, they misspelled my name. They got me as Bill Cottrell. Well, for the folks that don't know, Bill Cottrell was Walt's brother-in-law. And I used to get Bill Cottrell's mail all the time, and he used to get my mail all the time. So I was like, oh, damn, this is awful tempting just to go and say I didn't notice it, but he might miss his invitation that year. So I had to call up and say I've got his invitation. The other thing about wardrobe is I went down to Florida, and there was a tram ride that would take you from like the casting building into the tunnel, you know, back there. And it was hotter than hell one day. And these two guys get on the tram ride, and they're wearing snowmobile suits. And it was like, what the hell? I mean, I'm out there dying just in a shirt and a tie, and these guys are wearing snowmobile suits. And they had unzipped and they pulled it down to their waist. And I said, what on earth are you wearing a snowmobile suit for in the middle of Florida in the middle of summer? The guy says, we work inside a walk-in freezer all day. They were from Central Foods. So yeah, it was just bizarre because you sit there and there's somebody dressed up, you know, in, you know, the Tomorrowland outfit, and somebody, and there's a guy in a snowmobile suit in Florida in August. But yeah, the wardrobe department was great, and they had all the costumes from all the old movies down there. They still had the Mouseketeer outfits were down in the basement, all sorts of great stuff. Other thoughts? Other folks went back to Disneyland in those periods of time?
I have a
You
question,
showed
Bill. It's
What?
it's Debbie. In 1957, late 57, early 58, do you know if they had wooden picnic benches where guests could come and bring their own food and eat, and where would that be
Yeah.
located?
Yeah, that was off to the left-hand side of the park. That was still actually there when I got there. They had a area, sort of, if you came up to the main gate, it was over, back when I started there in 76, it was right behind where Pirates was. And there was a small, it wasn't easy to see because they didn't want to make it obvious, bring your own food and don't buy ours. But you could go in there and there were picnic tables and some umbrellas and that. And it was, I think there were about 10 or 12 tables in there. And if you were trying to come into the park with your food, they would tell you to, you know, turn around at the gate, go back, eat it there, and put your picnic stuff back in the car. So I was still there even in the 70s. I don't know what year they decided to take that out.
that was what was left of Holidayland. You know, he had Holidayland when he opened the park.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that might have been over in that area. For the folks that don't know it, that was another thing where the circus area was. They had built an area called Holidayland, and the idea was that you would bring in, you'd rent it for your company, that you could have a, you know, Cotter Day at Disneyland, and you could go out there and you have you know, three-legged races and egg tosses and all the things you might do at a you know, a company picnic, and you could get just admission to Holidayland, or you could, if your company was really generous, you could also then get admission into the park. So it was actually a gate between the two, you know, to keep people, so that the normal Disneyland people didn't just wander into Holidayland or vice versa. So that was out there for a number of years. And it's interesting. I only have other people's pictures, none of my own collection of it, because Holidayland was not a huge success. Because again, if you're going to go all the way down to Anaheim, you're going to go and ride on the carousel. You're not going to do an egg toss or, you know, some of those other things. But yeah, Holidayland didn't last too long. And it might have been right around that area, Don, where the picnic area was. It was a nice little secluded area because, again, it was basically a kind of a pocket area where you had it was like a horseshoe shape, and you came in off from the bottom side. The tables were in there. The monorail went just overhead. It was kind of a neat spot that you could go off and hide.
One of my formerly favorite rides was the Mine Train, Nature's Wonderland.
Oh
And
yeah.
I don't remember what year that started. You didn't have any pictures of it, so it's probably later.
Nature's Wonderland, yeah, I actually do have pictures of it, but not that were taken in these years. So if I do this for the next, if folks are interested, I can do Disneyland the second 5 years, and I've got tons of pictures of Nature's Wonderland. I also, when I started out there, as I mentioned, it was a favorite area of mine, so I actually walked the track. I have pictures of the burrow, paths. With the burrow's been gone for about 10 years at that time. But yeah, it was great. I had one picture I just restored the other day of a whole bunch of bears out there, and some of them are up in trees and they're reaching to try to get a beehive, and other bears are scratching their backs on the back of trees. So if we do again, I'll do Nature's Wonderland was just a wonderful area. I mean, I like Big Thunder. I just wish the two of them could have coexisted. Now with Nature's Wonderland, you went through all the bubbling mud pots, the tumbling rocks, the cactus, and everything. And then you went into the caverns, which were all done with black light. So you had all sorts of different water coming down, and they had some real issues on how do you keep the blue water away from the green water, because water tends to splash. And that's very, very hard to find pictures of, because when the lights were off, to give it the color of the colored waters and everything, it was very hard to take pictures in black light. So there's one section of footage I can get from a Disneyland show where they actually, the train goes in there, and they it was done in black and white, but somebody later colorized it. So some parts of the park are very, very hard. And even if you go to Disney and try to find pictures of Nature's Wonderland or the caverns, people just didn't take them, because they do exist on one Viewmaster reel, and I could pop that up in the future. And that's basically the only contemporary color picture we've found of it, that somebody had the foresight to take a picture one day.
Anyway, I missed that. To this day, I miss that ride.
Yeah, it was a great ride, and they donated the train. One of the trains is being restored over at the Griffith Park Live Steamers. They've got some of the cars and I think one of the engines over there now. So yeah, it was a real shame to see that go. Like I said, it was one of my favorite parts of the park, and I spent a whole bunch of hours wandering around out there. What was great when you'd be out there wandering around, and all of a sudden they would decide to fire up the animation, and out of nowhere, boom, a big theme of water would jump off. I was convinced that that was not accidental at times, that hey, that asshole's back out on the back, get him.
You showed pictures of the burrows, riding the burrows. How long did that last? Because I have a photo that I'm not sure. I was riding a burrow, and it looks like a fake rock wall, but I'm not sure if it was taken in Disneyland or somewhere else.
Lasted about 10 years or more. They eventually got rid of them because it was a very labor-intensive ride. They also had problems. The burrows would tend to bite people from time to time, and as a result, they decided to drop it. So they lasted. Again, some people could tell you right down to the day. Oh, it ended on a Friday at 2:00.
Yeah.
I'm not that detail oriented, but it lasted about 10 plus years.
I think I'll put. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think I'll put that picture up on the vintage Disneyland site and have people tell me whether or not it is a Disneyland picture. But
Yeah. And if it's not, they'll let you know for sure.
oh yeah, well I'll ask, because they'll
They
know.
took the burrows out in 1979
Oh, then yeah.
Oh, okay. So 14
to
years.
build Big Thunder. I've been in mourning ever since.
Mm-hmm.
I love the burrows.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the burrows lasted until 79. It's funny, I don't remember them, and I started in 76.
Yeah, they were still there. I
Hmm.
remember going on it the last day or last time I was there, and they said, well, we're taking this out. I was so unhappy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, I think, 3 when that picture was taken, so it would have been around 64. But yeah, I'll send it in. I no identifying factor except a large rock wall to our left, and that looks like one of Disney's man-made rock walls, but it's hard to tell from a picture that old. So
Yeah, that area was just great to walk through. I mean, it was really, really well done. And it's unfortunate. Progress moves on. At least they replaced it with a good attraction. It wasn't like they tore it down and put in Pooh's Great Ride or whatever. It's Pooh's Adventure.
Yeah, but if you're not a roller coaster, I can't ride roller coasters very well. So I've only been on Big Thunder a few times. So for me, it didn't work very well, because I'd sooner ride the burrows and the mine train and all that.
Yeah,
That roller coaster, and it was like, well, okay.
yeah, of the two, I'd probably prefer the Mine Train, but the Big Thunder, at least it's well themed and
Yeah, well, no, it's
it's
good. I've ridden on it. I can't ride roller coasters very well. I have problems with my inner ears, so
Hey,
so
Bill.
much fun.
yeah, Rich.
Yeah. Can you touch on the model airplanes in Tomorrowland that they used to fly, and the jetpack guy that we used to fly, and
Yeah.
and Retlaw, and all the things that Retlaw owned and operated, like the steam trains.
Yeah, Retlaw, folks that probably know it, but Retlaw, Walter spelled backwards, and Retlaw owned a lot of the transportation systems for the park when it first opened. So things like the steam train, the horse-drawn carriages down Main Street, basically anything that we could pay cash for an A-ticket, you know, they would come back at the end of the day, they'd have to account to Retlaw how many people were on the train, how many people were on the view line, and how many people were on those particular things. And that was, again, where Roy didn't want to pay for some of these things. Walt really wanted to do it. So Walt said, if I'm going to put up my own personal money to do it, I'm going to get my own personal profits back out of it. So they had that for quite a period of time. And then eventually, after Walt died, the Disney company bought out the right to anything that Retlaw had, which was basically the transportation systems, but also the right to Walt's image and his name. So the company business became part of the Disney business. But I can remember being back in cash control, and at the end of the day, you know, the massive operation, as you can imagine, all the tickets coming in and everything. They'd be trying to figure out how many tickets and how many dimes they took in, because you could pay a dime to go and ride on these things. And they'd be doing the Retlaw accounting for the day. The model airplane area, and I got pictures of it, was the sort of airplane it wasn't remote controlled. You would start up the engine, and you had guy wires that would go to the plane, and you could fly it around. And then using your control stick, your handle, you could make it climb, dive, that sort of thing. So people would come out. It was smart of Disney. You had a big area to do it. You get this model airplane company to sponsor it. And now you have model airplane clubs, which were very popular in the 50s for people to build and do their own airplanes. Come down to Disneyland and fly your airplanes at our model airplane drome here. In some cases, they gave people the free admission for the people that did the flying, but their families would have to pay to come in and do it. Others, they would, just have them pay admission, come in and do it. They also had the model boat area there, and they had model boats over at the Disneyland Hotel that were remote controlled in the later years. I think the ones in Tomorrowland, you would just basically set the controls, and they'd have boat races to get from A to B, and your boat would go, but the other guy's boat would turn. You'd win, he wouldn't. But that was a popular area, very cheap for them to do, because it filled up a very large area. You figure you have 12, 20 guys with these airplanes going around. You got to give some distance there. So it gave a big central spot of area right in front of the, it was right near the mission, the flight to the moon. It was the moon at the time. So it was right near the mission to the moon, and it was out there. And then in later years, when they decided they needed space, and the model airplane and everything craze kind of died down too, they took that out. Now, the guy for the jetpack was only there a very short period of time. It was mostly around the 10th anniversary. He flies up, and matter of fact, that's how my book on Disney TV got started, because Disney, I was working at Warner's at the time, and Disney called and said, hey, do you remember what years we had the guy fly around the Matterhorn? And I said, oh, yeah, I knew that, and started talking and got the book going out of my notes. But he did not do that on a regular basis. That was basically a promo thing done to attract interest. That jetpack, very, very noisy. Have anybody ever been around one of those jetpacks when it fired up?
Yeah. Loud.
Yeah, very loud. Hydrogen peroxide fueled, and it just made a lot of noise. They flew it up around the Matterhorn, and came back down. There was always the fear whether or not the thing would go up and drop in mid-flight, which would not be good. We actually looked a number of years ago, if people remember, when they ended the electrical light parade, they came up with one, I think was called Spectro Magic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a disaster of a parade. And I got asked by Disney to come back and try to come up with a replacement parade and some elements at it. And we were really far into it. We had been building some mock-ups. I was working for the entertainment division down at Disneyland. And we were all set to go until Eisner heard about it and basically almost fired everybody involved with it, because he had come up with the approval for Spectral Magic and nobody was going to cancel his parade. But one of the things we had done was we had looked and said, oh, the Bell Jetpack, there's another version of it. Wouldn't it be really nice if, as the parade came down, we could do the loop around the Matterhorn one more time and do this thing? And we had actually been in contact with getting the jetpack back at Disneyland until Eisner kiboshed it. And like I said, I was a contractor. He couldn't fire me. He did end the contract, but he almost fired everybody at the entertainment division. So, but we had a great parade. We had all sorts of gimmicks. It was going to be called Disneyland on the Air. And it was going to be the idea that Disneyland had done all these great TV things and we were coming back to recreate it. And one of the things we had actually done was, somebody's got me on the speaker there. One of the things I had done was the idea of how about the world's largest Davy Crockett hat hanging on the Matterhorn with a big sheet over it so nobody knew it was up there. And then Fess Parker would come out and unveil the world's giant Davy Crockett hat. And we got far enough that we actually went out and figured out how much the world's largest Davy Crockett hat would weigh. Got together with the folks that could tell us whether or not it could hang on the Matterhorn. And we were really, so we were so far along in some really neat stuff. And Fess was, oh yeah, I'd love to come and do it. And then Eisner, that was the end of it. So Disneyland on the Air only exists in memories and sketches, but it was one of those fun projects you work on. As or my other Imagineering buddies know, life is full of fun projects that you work on that never get to be. But we were going to bring the jetpack back to the park. And I was not going to try to fly it.
One of the other things when I was working there between 69 and 70 was lighting and sound on the stages in Tomorrowland. And the mixing console for the stage, the Tomorrowland stage, was up on the roof above the gift shop right next to it. And it was kind of a weird thing because it was outdoors and you just had to keep everything covered up when you weren't working.
Or when it rained.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Bill?
Yeah.
Hey, it's Mike. We should also mention that same jetpack was used in Lost in Space and Thunderball.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Mike and I are big Lost in Space fans. And then that was in the series. Again, they would hire a guy to go and fly it around. And then Guy Williams would put on the jetpack but not fly it around. But and again, Thunderball, James Bond, and he's at the chateau, has the big battle, beats up the what they think is a widow, but is really an assassin. And then he runs out, picks up the jetpack, flies off the chateau, lands it, and jumps into the DB5 and drives away. So, yeah, those things were really great.
I once saw that jetpack in person at the New York State Fair, and it's the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, well, you didn't hear it until you heard it at the 64 World's Fair, because they flew it across a stage area for the show that was at the amphitheater, and it had a roof across it to keep the sun out. So not only did you get the normal volume of it, but there was no way for the thing to escape. It would go and bounce off the roof, and it was just hellacious when they lit that thing up. It was unbelievable.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. So
yeah, it definitely was ear splitting. There's a book out on the history of the jetpack. If anybody's interested, look up the topic. But one of the most interesting things is, in order to contain the fuel for it, they had a hard time getting containers that were clean enough that they wouldn't degrade the hydrogen peroxide before they filled up the jetpack.
yeah, I guess you only had a certain amount of time from fuel to flight, right? Sorry, just answering a question. Somebody wants to get a jetpack. Don't we all? I mean, imagine the freeway. You know, actually, I'm so glad jetpacks aren't available to everybody, because as a pilot, I like the fact that if I fly from here to there, there's not 18,000 other people all flying around at the same altitude doing whatever they want, you know? So imagine today with jetpacks, if you try to get from here to there, I don't know, how do you get everybody come to a stop, you know, at a certain intersection and let the other guys go, or they just smack into each other? It'd be really a mess. But when you are sitting in traffic, you keep thinking about, oh, I wish I had a flying car. I wish I had a jetpack. It could be fun. I also imagine it could be fatal. We even have somebody that named who the assassin was. Yeah, it's funny how your memories come back to all these, you know, different things. You know, I cannot remember, where the proverbial, where are the car keys? Well, they're always by the front door, but other things, where the hell did I put this? And then you can remember exactly where you were on this particular date and this particular time, or what the name of that third person in the background in that scene in a movie was. It's funny how life goes. Well, I hope folks enjoyed a look back at Disneyland. We should have all worn Mickey Mouse ears or something, but again, we think about it. You didn't have to drive on the freeway. You didn't have to park in the parking garage. You didn't have to go through security. You didn't have to stand 6 feet apart. There's a couple people that are close together, but I assume you're all in the same families. So hopefully we'll have Disneyland open again soon. But in the meantime, we will just have to do it. Leslie went and got her ears. Very good. Oh, and these are actually the anniversary ears. Wow, you got those fast. I saw everybody waiting on the line. I said, maybe I'll get a set of ears. And I got on the line and said, there are 70,000 people in front of you. And I said, I don't have time to sit around and wait. So next week, I'm going to do Vanished Southern California attractions. People had suggested it last week. So we're going to look at the Japanese Deer Park. I'm also, not just Vanished, I'm going to look at ones that have changed over time. So we'll look at some of early Knott's, things that are gone from Knott's. Look at some other Busch Gardens. I was getting into it last night, restoring some more pictures for that. And we'll just look at some other vintage things that are, you know, back from people's childhoods that aren't here in the Southern California area anymore. And then again, if people have suggestions for the week after next, please let me know. When I was saying, Debbie, you got a suggestion?
I just want to take a vote with this group here. How many of you want to do the next 5 years of Disneyland in his next empty time that he could do a Zoom?
Sounds good to me.
Me.
Anybody jumping up and down? Oh, someone's jumping
Well, I
up.
would, but
There we go.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
I would love that. You should do that next week so we could all have it kind of.
Well, I already put on the schedule. I'm going to do the
Okay.
Vanished Southern California. But yeah, 2 weeks from now, I can do the Disneyland the second 5 years. And like I
Right.
said, I started, you know, putting this together, and my first thought was Disneyland the first 25 years. And then I started realizing, wow, there's so much that's changed over time, you know. And like I said, I have many more pictures from the 60s than I do of the 50s. So I'll start filling things in. But yeah, I'd like to get into, you know, the, like I said, the pictures I took Disneyland without people in it. You know, it was funny. I was on line last night, and somebody put a picture of their car parked somewhere in the park. I think it was in Fantasyland. And somebody started going on about, oh, you photoshopped that in. I go, oh, man, I've been through this myself. You know, people don't realize that when the park was closed, you could drive through the park. The one rule, they had two rules. You can't drip while, and you can't drive over the bridge. Well, this guy was very proud he had actually driven over the bridge. And people are, oh no, it's obviously photoshopped. You can tell from the shadows that it's not, not the real thing. And I've gone through that with people swearing, that's not your car. It was there for a photo shoot for a magazine. It's my car. It's got my license plate on it. You know, so it was, you know, Disneyland was just, you had a meeting on the other side of the park. I could walk all the way over, or I could drive over. So my car was parked right outside my office. I'd get in the car, I'd drive around the park. I'd go to my meeting at the warehouse. I'd drive over back again. If I had to go back and forth from the admin building to the warehouse 3 times in a day, I would drive, right? And these people are getting this furious war, you know, but no, that just can't be. You weren't allowed to do that. It's like, yes, you were. You know, so, it is just funny how people react. I can also say from experience that if you took one of the Autopia cars and took the governor off it, they go really, really fast. And when you took them off the track and you took them around Tomorrowland at night, you could have a really, really good time, particularly if you put the trash cans out and you used them as pylons. But, I said from experience. No, that's what I heard. I heard. So all the things that you would do back then that you could say, oh God, how many times did I risk my career in this 1 week? So, but yeah, those cars are pretty spiffy, and the mechanics knew how to, make them go real, real fast. So it was great fun. But okay, well, I'll do next week. I'll do, yeah. Somebody asked in the chat here, did I have Busch Gardens? Yes, I do. And it was, oh, you got the ears at downtown Disneyland. They were, yeah, you were at Notch yesterday. Wow, you get around. You're keeping busy. So,
Hey, Mr. Bill.
yes, Mike.
Hey, it's Mike. I just, while you were talking about those ears, I wish I had time to run out to the garage and get them. But Bill Cotter took me and my wife to the 1980 25th anniversary taping of the Mouseketeers special at the studio. And I think they handed out ears.
Yeah,
And
we
Yeah.
have ears from that. I know.
yeah, I got mine signed by
Actually-
Annette that night. It was, and they're still out there in the garage.
That was, I still have mine around somewhere too. And I just came across Carol's and hers was signed. I don't know where mine went, but that was really neat. Working at the studio, they said, we need an audience for the anniversary show. Yeah. So if you watch the show, I'm sitting there and Carol's next to me and the mic, and it goes by real quick, and 7.89 nanoseconds or something. But we were sitting right behind Cheryl's mom, who was in the front row. We were in the second row, and the Mouseketeers during the breaks would come over to say hi to Cheryl's mom, and it was great fun. It was one of the nice perks working at the studio at the time.
And the extra thrill for me was they had the original blue curtain hanging up there in the background.
Yeah, I had been hanging in the rafters of stage 2 all those years, and they took it down, cleaned it, and put it back out for the show.
I wonder if they'll put that on Disney Prime.
Oh, geez, who knows? So I'm actually on 2 episodes of Disney Prime coming up this fall. So assuming I make the cut, I don't end up on the proverbial floor, but they're doing a show about Disneyland behind the scenes about the building of Disneyland, and I'm one of the talking heads that will show up on that. So as Mike knows, I work cheap.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
You guys should dig out your ears for the next Disneyland talk.
Yeah,
you can show.
the trouble is which set. I mean, wow, there's so many of them. But yeah, okay. Anybody that doesn't wear Mickey Mouse ears 2 weeks from now will make terrible fun of. I almost feel like I have Mickey Mouse ears on today.
That's pretty close.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have any Mickey Mouse ears anymore.
Well, you can do what Leslie did. Go down to downtown Disneyland and buy a set.
Oh.
And we need you to do it because it's the only way the mouse is making money these days, and it's the only way that people's pension checks are going to arrive. So,
Bill, you look more like Princess Leia.
I know. I feel exactly like that. I do it because this has a really good noise canceling headset on it, so that when the air conditioner kicks on or the dogs are much louder than you would have heard. So I wear it for that. But when I'm doing other chats where the sound's not that important, the headset, it goes off because, yeah, I do feel like Princess Leia. So, well,
You
thanks
look
all.
like her too.
Well, I do what I can.
I'm just kidding.
So,
Listen, I really want to thank you. I love this. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for these wonderful talks.
Oh, appreciate it. And again, I encourage anybody, if you're into photo restoration, worldsfairphotos.com. Off on the right-hand side, you'll see photo tips. Excuse me. If there is anybody that wants to get started and would like to, get any personal thoughts or anything, drop me an email or a Facebook message or whatever, and I'll be glad to try to help you on it. It's really great, and it's a great way to get your family photos back, not just your Disneyland pictures, but the pictures of your kids. Or I have crates of them I've taken out of my parents' house. I'm restoring, and I don't appear in most of them because I took most of them. It's like, I don't know about you guys, my parents were not into photography, so there's all the pictures of the family and no Bill. There's all the pictures of the family doing this and no Bill. And there's all the it's like, people look at them and said, "Do your parents not like you or something?" I said, "Well, I think they did, but I took all the pictures." So I was into photography big from when I was about 7 years old, and just kept doing that. But again, there's also, if anybody is interested, World's Fair Photos does have all my stuff about the various World's Fairs and other many ways you can waste many hours of your day or night out on the site. So thanks, folks, for coming. And next week we will be hopping around various parts of Southern California to Lion Country Safari, Busch Gardens, the Japanese bird farm, some other things that have changed the original Griffith Park Zoo. As a matter of fact, I've got pictures of the Griffith Park Zoo back from 1939 and stuff. So we're going to go way back into things. As a matter of fact, anybody ever hear of the Bernheim Japanese Gardens? Long vanished theme park area. It was a rich philanthropist decided he wanted to build a beautiful botanical gardens and built it, and it was really kind of spectacular. So we'll be looking at that long vanished theme park, a whole bunch of other odds and ends. So hope folks have a nice enjoyable day. It's not too hot for the rest of it, and we will see you next Saturday.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Take care.
Thanks, Bill.
Great. Thanks all.